Somewhere in the last 2 years, a story settled into place about AI and jobs. You have probably heard it. You may have repeated it. You almost certainly believe some version of it, even if you think of yourself as someone skeptical of hype. The story: AI is coming for jobs. The most exposed roles go first. The displacement will be fast. And by the time most people realize what is happening, the window to adapt will already be closing. That story is not entirely wrong. But it is wrong in the specific ways that matter most for the decisions you are making right now. Leila heard it and made a major career pivot 18 months ago. Left a role she was good at, retrained, moved into a field she thought was safe. The role she left is still there. The skills she built in it are still valuable. The pivot was not necessary. James heard the same story and decided it was overblown. He has made no changes to how he works or where he is investing his attention. He is not wrong that the dramatic version was overstated, but he drew the wrong conclusion from being right about that. There is a third person who heard the same story and did something different with it. This video is about what they understood that Leila and James did not. The myth is not a harmless misconception. It produces two failure modes, and they are mirror images of each other. Leila's failure mode: believing the dramatic version. She made changes that were premature, expensive, and calibrated to a threat that did not look the way she expected. She pivoted away from a role that still had runway. She paid a cost that was not necessary. James's failure mode: recognizing the dramatic version was overblown, he dismissed the concern entirely. He stopped paying attention at exactly the moment when quiet, structural changes began to compound. Both failure modes come from the same source, a mental model of AI displacement that is inaccurate in its timing, its pattern, and its unit of analysis. The accurate mental model produces neither mistake. It produces something more useful: a precise understanding of what is actually happening, on what timeline, at what level of granularity. That is what this video is for. The story most people believe was shaped by one specific moment. The Oxford study by Frey and Osborne in 2013 estimated that 47% of U.S. employment was at high risk of automation within 10 to 20 years. That number traveled fast. It anchored mainstream coverage of AI and jobs for nearly a decade. What happened next was more complicated. A 2019 OECD analysis of the same data using task-level rather than occupation-level measurement found only 14% of jobs were highly automatable. Not 47. Not because AI got less capable. Because the unit of analysis mattered enormously. When you look at what people actually do rather than what their title implies, the picture changes. The productivity data told the same story. If AI was displacing workers at the predicted scale, you would expect significant employment changes in the most exposed sectors. The data through 2024 shows gains, but modest, uneven, and concentrated in specific task categories. Not the wave the headline implied. What the data shows is not that nothing is happening. Something is definitely happening, but it is slower than predicted, more selective than predicted, and concentrated at the task level rather than the role level. Leila prepared for the wrong version. James dismissed the right version because it did not match the dramatic one he had been sold. Here is the mechanism. 4 steps. Step 1. What the myth actually claims. The myth has 3 components, each wrong in a specific way. First, displacement is categorical. AI takes a job, the whole thing, all at once. That is the unit most people use when they ask, will AI take my job? The actual unit is the task, not the role. Second, it will be fast and legible. A headline, a layoff announcement, an unmistakable signal. The actual pattern is slower and harder to read. A role still there, but slightly different. Tasks still being done, but by fewer people. Functions gradually absorbed into adjacent roles rather than disappearing cleanly. Third, the most exposed go first in a clear sequence. The actual pattern is less orderly. It depends on which organizations adopt AI tools, how they implement them, how quickly adjacent tasks shift variables that do not resolve into a clean sequence. Leila believed all three. She acted on a picture inaccurate in exactly the ways that made her response wrong. Step 2. What the data actually shows: three differences from the myth. First, displacement is happening at the task level, not the role level. Bell's data through 2024 does not show large-scale occupational disappearance. It shows task-level substitution within roles-specific categories of work, absorbed by tools, while the roles persist in altered form. Second, the pace is uneven across organizations, not uniform across industries. Two companies in the same sector can be at completely different stages of AI integration because of leadership decisions, tool adoption, culture. My industry is exposed is a much weaker predictor of individual impact than most people assume. Third, the visible impacts so far are concentrated in specific task categories: structured information processing, document generation, data analysis with defined parameters, customer interactions that follow scripts, concentrated in roles where those categories dominate. Two people in the same company can be experiencing completely different pressure depending entirely on what their specific week is made of. James dismissed the whole picture because the dramatic version was wrong. But the task-level version is real. It is just quieter and less legible than a headline. Step 3. Why the myth is dangerous. The myth produces bad decisions in both directions simultaneously. For Leila, the binary framing pushed her toward a binary response. The decision was made at the wrong level of granularity, on a timeline that did not match the actual pace of change. Her direction was not wrong. Her urgency was. She paid a cost that did not need to be paid yet. For James, the myth created permission for inaction. He correctly identified the dramatic version as overstated and concluded the concern itself was overblown. He is right that 47% of jobs are not about to disappear. He is wrong that nothing is happening at the task level in his specific role. The myth is dangerous not because it is entirely false. It is dangerous because it is false in the specific ways that make both panic and dismissal feel reasonable. Step 4. The accurate mental model here is what the data actually supports. AI displacement is real, ongoing, and consequential. But it is happening at the task level, on a multi-year timeline, unevenly distributed, in a pattern more dependent on task composition than the dominant narrative suggests. Three things follow from that. The binary question has no useful answer. Will AI take my job produces either panic or false security. Replace it. The timeline is longer than the myth suggests, which means more room to adapt deliberately. But it is real, which means waiting until the pressure is obvious is waiting too long. Your task composition is the variable that matters most, not your title, not your industry. What is your specific week actually made of, and which parts are losing value, and which are gaining it? That is the mental model. Not dramatic, not dismissive. Precise. 3 people. Same narrative. 2 years later, Leila made the pivot. She is in a genuinely more protected role. But she spent 12 months in a learning curve she did not need to enter yet. Walked away from institutional knowledge that would have kept compounding. Made an expensive decision under urgency that did not actually exist. She is fine. But she paid a cost that was not necessary. James made no changes. Still in the same role, same work, same skills. Also fine for now. But 2 years of task-level change have accumulated quietly, and some of the things he is best at are starting to be handled differently in his organization. He has not noticed yet. He will. The third person, Nadia, heard the same story. Also thought the dramatic version was overstated. But she did not stop there. She looked at her own task composition, identified which parts of her week were under pressure, made one deliberate shift, not a pivot, not a retraining, just a reweighting toward the parts of her role gaining value. Still in the same role, has not retrained, has not pivoted, but her task composition is different than it was 2 years ago, more weighted toward judgment, more toward illegible work and she is building in exactly the direction that matters. Same narrative. 3 different mental models. 3 different positions. Nadia's position is the one worth understanding. It came not from better luck, but from a more accurate picture of what was actually happening. 1. Reframe. This week, stop asking, will AI take my job? Start asking, which specific tasks in my role are under pressure? On what timeline? And what is the next task I should be building toward? That question has a useful answer. It is task level, specific to your actual work, and points toward action that is proportionate, rather than panicked or paralyzed. Here is how to make it concrete. Take your task list, the 8 to 10 things that make up most of your week. For each one, ask 2 questions. First, is this structured output that can be evaluated without watching me produce it, or context-dependent judgment that requires my specific presence? Second, is the economic value of this task increasing, decreasing, or stable? Not based on how it feels. Based on what you observe, how people around you are using tools, how your organization is thinking about headcount, what adjacent roles are starting to look like. Those 2 questions give you a directional read on each task. The aggregate gives you something no industry report can, an accurate picture of your specific position at the level of granularity that actually determines what happens to you. Nadia ran this exercise, not with a spreadsheet, just with honest attention to what her week was made of and where the pressure was landing. It took her an afternoon. It changed what she prioritized for the next 2 years. Leila prepared for the dramatic version and paid the cost of false urgency. James dismissed the whole thing because the dramatic version was wrong and missed the real version operating underneath it. Nadia understood what was actually happening at the right level of granularity, on the right timeline, and made decisions proportionate to the actual situation, rather than the story she had been sold. The difference was not information. All 3 had access to the same headlines, the same research. The difference was the mental model they applied to it. The myth said something was either happening dramatically or not happening at all. The data says something more precise. It is real. It is at the task level. It is on a multi-year timeline. It is uneven. And it is more within your control than the dramatic version implies. That is the story worth holding. Not because it is more comforting, it is not. Exactly, because it is more useful. It gives you the right unit of analysis and puts the variable that matters most back in your hands. The question is not, will AI take your job? The question is, which parts of your job are you choosing to build toward? And are those the parts gaining value or losing it? Once you have an honest answer to that, the next problem is what to actually do about it. What does deliberately shifting your task composition look like in practice? What does it mean to invest in the right direction when you still have to deliver the legible work your role requires today? That has a structure. And it is worth understanding precisely. That is what comes next.